Dads, you're not bad at balance. Balance was designated for a different era, different families, and different expectations of fathers. So equal time doesn't equal impact.
Welcome to the Dad Central Show, the podcast that helps overwhelmed dads conquer stress, build confidence, and become the father their family brags about. Join Drew Solon, a leadership coach and father of five, and Ed Gow Jr., a fatherhood advocate and contributor to the Good Men Project, as we guide you through the journey of fatherhood. We'll show you how to connect deeply with your family, manage your time and energy better, and master tools to become the dad you want to be. Let's get started.
If work keeps bleeding into your home and home feels like another job, are you actually bad at balance? Or is the model broken? Let's realize that most dads that we work with at Dad Central aren't failing at balance. They're operating inside a system that was never designed for fatherhood. So there's some realities that many dads are dealing with today. Work, kids, partner, finances, health. You don't have a true on-off switch. And you have those moments of guilt saying at work, I should be at home. And at home, I should be doing more. And also there's separated and divorced dads juggling parenting schedules, legal stress, providing presence in a limited time. And there's also single dads carrying full responsibility with no backup, and dads trying to be emotionally present and financially stable. So let's realize that if this feels impossible, it's not because you're weak, it's because the model you're using is outdated. So on today's Dad Central show, we're going to be talking about work-life dad balance, why the old model fails on the Dad Central show. And as always, the Dad Central show is a parenting podcast to reduce stress and build confidence in fatherhood. Our show is sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. Dove Men Plus Care believes care is the best of a man, because when men care for themselves and others, there's a positive impact. And hello, Drew. How are you?
I'm good. Start of the year. Wild weekend in the NFL wildcard playoffs, which was a lot of fun to watch with Jordan, my son. And the year is it's moving fast, but I'm enjoying these opportunities that we're bringing to dads through the podcast this year.
Excellent. And let us not forget, if you are watching this, subscribe. If you're subscribed already, because there's many people that watch this, but they don't subscribe. We'd love you to subscribe. If you're listening to this, whatever platform you're listening on, subscribe and also provide comments and feedback. So let's chat about this conversation topic today. Your initial thoughts, because I know work-life balance is one of your phrases you not are fully comfortable with. So before we get into our points, what are your initial thoughts?
Yeah, I think this is a constant challenge for dads everywhere. No matter what, I think the reality is dads feel pulled in many different directions, and sometimes it can feel overwhelming, or it can feel like there's just not enough time in the day, or you don't have enough energy for all the people who demand your energy. It feels very challenging. So I just want to say that I get that. I feel it probably every single day. But there are some really cool things that I think we've learned, and that's our theme this month is helping dads with this big challenge. So every podcast this month is going to touch on something that will help dads, and I'm excited about that. I'm excited about applying it myself, and of course seeing the rewards. And some of this stuff I have done, and I've seen the benefits. So overall, I'm glad to be able to have the conversations, talk about really relevant, practical pieces that will hopefully serve dads.
Good stuff. So on today's show, we're going to cover some areas here. One, the old work-life balance model and why it fails dads. We're also going to chat about why modern dads have no margin. Then we're going to chat about reframing balance from time management to leadership. And we'll even get into a practical exercise. So Drew, let's start it off with our topic today, the old work-life balance model and why it fails today's dad.
Well, there are, I'd say, 4 key points that we can touch on here. One is that, the old thoughts were, oh, when you're at work, it stays at work. Throughout my professional life, I've rarely had work just stay at work. It almost always comes home with me. But somehow that's an old belief. The other thing is, home is restorative or home is, calm by default. I'm not sure how many dads are listening, but can you easily point to the fact that home is sometimes much more chaotic than you'd like it to be and does not feel very restorative? Probably fair. I think an important shift, dads in the past and with this old idea of, providers, we have been viewed or maybe even viewed ourselves as we're just the helper, right? Rather than someone who has a significant role to play in the home and the family. And so, that old mindset doesn't really work for the expectations and the reality of today. And also, this idea that balance means everything's equal or everything's always the way it's supposed to be, which, again, in reality, that's never been the case for my life. There's always elements of life that are in flux, moving. And so, when you have this idea that, everything's got to be balanced, again, I always think it's a losing mindset. That's not the truth and the reality. And so you have to really recognize those old assumptions don't apply to the reality of what life is like today. Those are some of my thoughts.
Yeah. I I also want to add on to what Drew says is why this model breaks down in today's society. Work is now portable, mental, and always on. And there's still a number of dads that work from home. They are or hybrid. There's always traveling. I have a good associate during the pandemic. He was working from home. It went, and then all of a sudden it was flipped to 5 days a week, right back on. And also, then we have home. Home includes emotional labor, logistics. I have to say the C word, one of the C words, conflict, and then also recovering from work stress. So equal time doesn't equal impact. Equal time doesn't equal impact. So we just want to say here, dads, you're not bad at balance. Balance was designated for a different era, different families, and different expectations of fathers. Anything you want to add on, Drew, before we move to the next point?
No, I think that's it.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, let's move forward with our next point. Why modern dads have no margin. I think you could probably spend the whole rest of this conversation on that. But where do you want to go on that one?
Well, I touched on it a few minutes ago. There's the cultural expectations of fathers are different. I also believe the fathers have different expectations for themselves. The research we have at Dad Central shows that dads really care about their fatherhood role and they want to be involved, supportive parents. And so that may not have been the case in, let's say, previous generations where their main focus was outside of the home. And so you have this natural dichotomy or this natural tension created when, yes, you have a role. And if you choose to provide as your a role, you also have these, you're providing at home in terms of, we talked about this idea of emotional labor or presence or connection, which are from our research, fathers say is really important to them. So you've got that challenge with this always on culture that we have. We've got cell phones or smartphones that our bosses or anyone can be in touch with us pretty much all the time. We've got notifications, we've got dings. There's a bleeding of boundaries between what would used to be work and home. We've got with working in our homes now, no separation between, well, we'll take 3 steps and we're actually at work. So there's some blurring of these lines that I think we have to acknowledge those have ripple effects and they impact on us in ways that sometimes are imperceptible at first, but over time you begin to see the differences. So I think that's really important. We've got the reality of financial and economic pressures. Like there's just a lot going on in the world, right? And things are changing. So those are some of the thoughts that I have.
Yeah, I'll build on that and the costs of all of this. There's chronic stress. Stress is always present in fatherhood, but all those factors we mentioned, plus others we didn't mention, has just increased the amount of stress that's being a father and a dad. Like being a dad and father, just in its own right, is stress, can be stressful and is, but all those factors on top of it, mentally, physically, and emotionally, have an impact. And sometimes our dads can have a short fuse. They can be numb or they just be the silent father. They withdraw and stay quiet.
Well,
Not a
Ed, can
good,
I add quickly
yeah.
to that? That is the result of that 24/7 always on culture, the internal desires to be involved and feeling this pressure with no outlet, no recognition that actually fatherhood is tremendously challenging. The old expectation of the society and culture is dads just deal with it. You've got to provide, you've got to work through it. There's no real safe place for that. So that creates what I would call a ticking time bomb, right? And that's why I think we see a lot of the mental and emotional wellness challenges that fathers are facing.
Yeah. And also, too, many dads feel like they're always behind. They're never keeping up. They're always behind. And we have to just say this too, that when everything matters, everything drains you. When everything matters, everything drains you. And let's also remember too that the problem isn't effort. The problem is load without recovery. I like that. Let's move to our next thing, reframing balance from time management to leadership. Drew, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think this is really important. Just like the distinction of moving from management to leadership in business really helped those who are in managerial roles reframe from systems to actually people. And I think the same thing goes here for dads is rather than shifting from, let's say, managing my time to actually learning how to connect and make the most of the time I do have. And so the old question you might be asking, well, how do I fit everything in? The reality is you don't. You can't. You have to choose, right? Sometimes you're making choices between a good choice and the best choice. And so the question that's better to ask yourself is what actually needs my best energy and what doesn't? And then this is the core of this question is priorities. And leaders prioritize the most important things first. And they go and they get those things done consistently. And they learn to leverage the people and the systems around them to push off or place boundaries around the things that are not as important. So when somebody's coming at you and it's like an emergency and you just drop everything, this is for the dads who are like the yes men. Oh, yeah, yeah, no problem. I can do. Yeah, no, no problem. Well, that's great. You may be able to, but should you? Is really the question you should be asking yourself. So this idea from a leadership lens is you got to recognize balance is not equal time or equal, giving it's not perfect routines and it's definitely not doing it all. Balance is prioritizing, deciding what matters most in this season or this period, protecting with boundaries your energy, not just hours in the day, and then learning how to design your day, your life, your family, your routines, your rituals. And my perspective here is that balance isn't something that you achieve, it's something that you have to lead yourself to create.
Excellent.
So those are my thoughts out there.
That is a beautiful segue into our last area, practical exercise, the dad balance check-in. So what's our dad balance check-in, Drew?
Well, it's an opportunity for listeners to do a quick self-assessment right now to get a sense of where might things potentially be off balance or I may be allowing creep into that are taking my energy away. It's similar to an exercise that it's actually an adaptation of the wheel of life exercise that as a Maxwell coach that we use often with our clients before we even get the coaching underway because we want to help create greater awareness around their existing life and all the different demands on it before we begin focusing on moving forward towards our goals. And so we want to offer that to listeners today. So, and a reminder, this is not about judgment, it's about awareness. Okay. And there's 5 dad domains that I'm going to ask you about. You're going to rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, just taking your gut reaction, no overthinking this. And 10 is being, I'm doing well in this area. And 1 is, I'm really struggling in this area. You can determine the scale there. So the 5 core dad domains are number 1, work and provision. This includes the income that you're earning, the workload that you're taking, any mental carryover that you have from work. Is it coming? So the question essentially is 1 to 10. How would you rate yourself in work and provision? Is work serving you or is it consuming it? Go ahead, take a moment, rate yourself. The second dad domain is your fatherhood and connection. Connection is relationship, feeling close, feeling valuable, feeling like there's a reciprocity in those important relationships. So, are you present with your children and your partner if you have a partner? Are you exhibiting the patience and are you seeing good quality of interaction? Now, this applies to you whether you're full time with your kids or you have limited time. Okay, so on a scale of 1 to 10, fatherhood and connection, how are you doing there? Third, is partnership or a co-parenting dynamic. So how are you doing in your intimate relationships, or how are you navigating and managing that co-parenting dynamic? What's the communication like? Is there a lot of tension? Do you feel emotionally safe? Are you creating emotional safety for those? Scale of 1 to 10. How are you doing in your partnership or co-parenting? The fourth area of your dad is health and energy. Okay, how's your sleep, your stress, your physical well-being? Right? Not perfection or, but how are you doing in terms of the overall capacity in your health and energy? Again, scale of 1 to 10. And finally, the last domain is caring for yourself and your identity. Do you have time to think? Do you have time to reset? Or do you feel like yourself? Or are you constantly feeling not like yourself? Also, do you have a sense of purpose beyond just surviving the day to day? Go ahead and rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. 10 being, yes, I'm doing well in this area. 1, obviously, I'm not. So, hopefully, those areas you've done an opportunity to really reflect very briefly. And so, we're going to ask 3 specific questions that you can also take and reflect on. In those 5 areas, which number surprised you? The next question is, which area of those 5 dad domains is costing you the most energy? And a follow-up question, which area stabilized would relieve pressure everywhere else? Now, hopefully, you need to pause the show, take a moment to reflect on those. It would be valuable because ultimately, what our goal here is to help you recognize that balance doesn't mean raising all of these numbers at once. It means knowing which of the one that's maybe not where it needs to be can't keep being ignored. So those are some of the important things. And that's a great, hopefully, exercise dads can take away to try and create some awareness. Because moving forward in the rest of this month, starting with next show, we're going to be talking and giving practical tools to be able to make some shifts. But we all know the growth always starts step number 1, awareness. Ed, over to you.
Excellent. So, just as a recap today, we covered a number of things on a deep dive. So, first, we talked about the old work life balance model and why it fails for today's dads. Then, we chatted about why modern dads have no margin. Then, we had reframing balance from time management to leadership. And then finally, Drew really broke it down, the dad balance check in, which is absolutely amazing. And we look forward to hearing from you and how you did on it. So, just a few things as we do a closing reframe. Balance and sustainability. Remember, your kids don't need a perfectly scheduled dad, a constantly available dad. They need a regulated dad, a dad who isn't always depleted. So, some takeaways we have today for all of you who are watching or listening to this episode. The old work-life balance no longer fits modern fatherhood. And guilt is often a sign of unrealistic expectations, not failure. And balance is about energy, leadership, and sustainability. And then awareness comes before change, and clarity reduces pressure. So, Drew, what is the resource we have for our family today?
Yeah, all this month, we are going to be providing a PDF called the Balanced Dad Blueprint. It will have that reflection exercise and we'll have key guidance from the different shows that we will be doing through the month of February. So the Balanced Dad Blueprint PDF, basically a workbook and reflection guide.
Fabulous. So, little tease for our next episode. Now that you can see where things are off, the next question becomes, how do I make changes that actually stick when life is busy and unpredictable? So, our closing thought here today, balance isn't about doing everything. It's about doing what matters without burning yourself out. So as always, want to say thank you for taking the most important thing, your time to listen or watch the show today. As always, don't just manage your time, manage your energy. Remember to give yourself grace, and we'll chat with you soon. Be well.